Welcome to The Explainer. You've probably heard it a million times, right? When you face a loss, you're just supposed to bounce back. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the real path to healing isn't about going back to who you were, but about growing into someone new? Today we're diving into the surprising science behind grief and what it teaches us about human growth.
Grief is one of those things that touches every single one of us. But it's not something we can just switch off when we walk into the office. And Joy Portela absolutely nails it here. It's a deep, emotional experience that hits our ability to focus, to perform, and it totally blurs the line between our personal and professional selves.
So, while pretty much everyone on the planet experiences loss, the journey through that loss is anything but universal. It is deeply, deeply personal, and as we're about to see, it almost never follows a straight line.
You know, we're often sold this neat little idea of grief, these clean stages you're supposed to check off a list. But reality? It's so much messier. It's more like waves in an ocean. It can come and go, and a big wave can hit you when you least expect it. There's just no set timeline for this stuff.
For a lot of people, that first, incredibly sharp pain of grief, well, it eventually softens. It doesn't disappear, but it gets woven into the fabric of their life. But that's not everyone's story. For some, that intense phase just doesn't fade. It sticks around and becomes this constant state of being. And that leads us to a really critical question. What is actually happening when grief doesn't just pass through, but instead becomes this constant, heavy presence that keeps someone from moving on with their life?
Well, this experience is so real and so distinct that in March of 2022, it was officially recognized in the DSM-5 as prolonged grief disorder. Now, this isn't just about feeling sad for a long time. We're talking about a persistent, intense yearning for the person who's gone that seriously gets in the way of day-to-day life.
And get this isn't some incredibly rare thing. It's estimated to affect about 10% of people who are grieving. That's 1 in every 10 people finding themselves stuck in this place where a natural human process has turned into a real clinical challenge.
So, let's zoom back out. For the majority of people who do manage to navigate trauma, psychology points to 2 very different ways recovery can look. It's not just about getting through it. It's about how you get through it and who you become on the other side.
Okay, so on one side, you have what we call resilience. Think of it like a rubber band. You get stretched by a tough situation, but then you snap right back to your original shape. You bounce back. But then there's this other path, post-traumatic growth. And this is totally different. This is not about returning to normal. It's about being fundamentally changed, and often for the better, because of the struggle you went through.
Okay, this is where things get really fascinating. When researchers dug into how these 2 things, resilience and growth, relate to empathy, they found something that might surprise you. Check this out. Higher resilience was actually linked to lower empathy. It kind of suggests that the ability to just power through and bounce back quickly might come at a cost to our ability to connect with what other people are feeling.
That whole distinction between just bouncing back and actually growing, it raises a much deeper question. I mean, is the growth that people say they experience after a trauma, is it even real? Or is it just a nice story they tell themselves to cope?
Right. Is it just a form of wishful thinking to make ourselves feel better? Or does going through something that difficult actually trigger a real, tangible shift in how our brains work? Well, a brilliant study put this to the test. They measured people's levels of resilience and post-traumatic growth, and then they tested their ability to recognize emotions in other people's faces. The results were pretty incredible. As you can see, resilience had basically no link to this skill. But post-traumatic growth? It was a huge predictor of how accurately someone could read other people's emotions.
And this is really the key takeaway here. The growth someone feels after a trauma isn't just an illusion or a mindset. It seems to be tied to a real, measurable improvement in a critical social skill, our ability to really see and understand how others are feeling.
So, all of this has huge implications for us personally. But what about in the wider world, especially in the place we spend so much of our time, the workplace?
When grief shows up at work, it often looks like mental fog, just feeling completely drained and finding it impossible to concentrate. It's so important for us to recognize these aren't signs of someone being a bad employee. It's the very real physiological impact of loss. You can't just power through that. So how can organizations actually help?
Well, this gives us a fantastic roadmap. It's about moving away from that just bounce back idea and creating real support. That means having clear, inclusive policies. It means building in flexibility because grief doesn't follow a schedule. And it means understanding the whole process and maybe most of all, just being human about it.
And that leaves us with one final big question. In our companies, in our communities, and even in our own lives, what's the goal? Are we just trying to build systems for resilience to help people get back to normal? Or are we trying to create the space for growth, the kind of space that allows loss to transform us into something more?